Hello world, it is I, the Mystic Philosopher, and you are tuned into the right number. And again, thanks for watching or for listening to this video. This video is a response to a request I've received from a few of my associates, my fellow associates that have asked me to do a video presentation on the subject of marriage and to share some of my perspectives on the question of what is marriage and what the institution called marriage is all about. They did so as a result of listening to me calling in on a very popular Sunday evening African, Canadian, Caribbean radio talk show right here in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, on which the topic and subject of discussion was marriage. I wish that someday the host of that program may get a chance just to watch and listen to this video. For during this video presentation, I will be answering the question that he asked me when I called in on the show and I did not answer, because I had just asked his very distinguished guest to answer 4 questions for me, and I did not want him, the guest, to be distracted. And moreover, I was on the phone while in the company of some other of my associates that were also listening to the show. And so I had to, of course, quickly get off the phone, and in order that I may turn up the radio so they could hear, and didn't want to cause a feedback in the radio station either. And we could also listen to the rest of the program as the guests answer my questions. In his introduction, which consisted of consisted of some very pointed statements and some very thought-provoking introductory comments, I might add, on the topic of marriage, along with the introduction of his guest, who is a reverend doctor and pastor. The talk show host and moderator of the program noticeably gave the definitions of a family in accordance with a Statistics Canada report. He also made a comment. He made a comment, and I will quote the host. He said, and I quote, "Marriage is under attack by the devil," said the institution, no doubt about that, unquote. His guest, the Reverend Doctor and Pastor, as part of his introduction and introductory comments on the topic, said almost all that he thinks and believes that marriage is not. But if he really knew and had a clear understanding in his heart and mind of what marriage really is and what the institution of marriage is all about, and if he truly wanted to communicate that fact in a simple, clear, and very straightforward way, then from my perspective, he did not do so. Not at all. He did not clearly state or define exactly what marriage is. However, he did say that it is as relevant today as when it first began, that marriage is an institution and that it is the business of God, etc. And to be fair to the Reverend, the straightforward answer to the question, what is marriage, as you shall no doubt shortly see, and one that I will expound on or will be expounding on throughout the rest of this presentation, can be logically deduced from his own response in the things that he said marriage is not, and also from what he thinks it is. But I am also aware of the fact that it is possible that he may disagree with my deduction of what marriage is from his own statements, due to the fact that my deduction might not be in total alignment or in alignment with his religious teachings or teachings, and possible his religious beliefs. For example, the Reverend Doctor and Pastor said, and I'll quote, "Marriage is not the church's business, even though the church is involved. And marriage is not the government's business, even though you have to get a license from the government to be married." He said, marriage is not even society's business, even though I think we have to go back to the very beginning to find out when did it all begin, whose idea was it, and for what reasons was marriage instituted. He said that he would want to conclude that marriage is God's business. Later on, the Reverend also said that marriage is not looked upon as something sacred and something that is fundamentally necessary. Unquote. Now, from these, the Rev's own comments, let me give you one thing and the one word that best describes and totally sum up what marriage and the institution of marriage is all about. What marriage is and what this institution of marriage is all about. And the one thing that I think that he and I may agree on, or at the very least we may disagree, or rather we may agree in principle, and it is that marriage is a business. And the institution of marriage is all about business, period. And as you shall see during, and as I hope to show during the rest of this presentation, to think otherwise, to think that marriage is not a business, is not wise. Now, here are some examples of things on which the Rev and I may never agree on. 1. According to the Rev, marriage is not the government's business. I strongly disagree. I personally think, and evidence will show, that it is the government that benefits the most from any and all forms of marriages. Number 2, according to the Rev, marriage is not society's business. I also disagree. From my perspective, and I intend to show in this presentation, that marriage is equal to business, which is equal to organization, which is equal to institution, which is equal to company, which is equal to corporation, which is the platform and foundation of all civilized or all civilizations and societies. According to the Rev, marriage is not looked upon as something sacred, etc. To this I somewhat agree. However, I personally think that a lot of people today have become free and independent-minded thinkers and are becoming far more enlightened to the fact that marriage is a business and that it is not necessarily the kind of religious sacrament that some religious people are portraying it to be. And as a result of this awakening, they don't see or accept marriage the way that it has been traditionally taught and has been presented to them, especially by the Christian church, as being holy, conjugal, etc. By conjugal marriage, I mean a marriage between one man and one woman, also known as husband and wife. For your information, conjugal marriages are a very recent Western Christian and European ideology and tradition. And it was the only form of marriage that was considered legal, or that would be made legal by the state, by the government, by the system, until quite recently that we saw new legislation permitting legal same-sex marriages. Now, let me make it very clear that I am not attacking or trying to attack anyone's beliefs or anybody's belief system. And I am not advocating or promoting any form of marriage or one form of marriage over another or over the other. Moreover, as individuals, I think we have a right to believe whatever we want to believe. We have a right to believe whatever we are told to believe or whatever we choose to believe. It's our right. However, we must be honest to ourselves and admit that our beliefs does not, cannot, and will not change the facts. For it is what it is. The fact is what it is. The fact that we say we believe is the fact that we do not know. For if or when we know, we would not believe. My only challenge with some believers is that some of their beliefs are so inconsistent with basic logic that they do not only appear confused and ignorant, but also as being intellectually dishonest. The evidence has shown that conjugal marriage is not, or conjugal marriages is not anthropological as it relates to the cultural development of humans. The evidence will show that conjugal marriage is normal, but it is not natural. It is not historical, meaning it is not a practice that is congruent with all societies throughout our recorded or even modern history. And above all, to the possible disappointment of many people, conjugal marriage is not scriptural or biblical. For I, the Mystic Philosopher, can show in the Christian Bible, which as a matter of fact, this same Christian Bible is my African ancestors' slave masters' holy book. The same holy book that they both taught to my ancestors, while my ancestors were the victims of the transatlantic slave trade. That is the same book that they taught to them while practicing their Christian holy religion. The Christian Holy Bible is the same holy book that my ancestors, heirs, and successors today have inherited and are teaching us their inheritance and descendants of the transatlantic slave trade today while practicing the faith of their fathers. So nothing much has changed. I can show you and would be happy and be more than happy to do so, where almost all, if not all, the patriarchs in the Christian Holy Bible had multiple wives, mistresses and concubines. And all those patriarchs in the Christian Holy Bible, kings and prophets, etc., were, from my perspective, and as the Bible itself would confirm, were much closer to the God of the Bible than any pope or clergyman or woman today. I am almost certain that the Reverend and I will disagree on that as well. But at least the Rev and I may, or we can both agree on one thing, and that is that marriage is a business. And as you shall also shortly see, marriage is not just a little business. Marriage is a huge business. I think it would be senseless, confusing, contradicting, misleading, disingenuous, or possibly just plain dishonest for one to say that marriage is not the business of God, or rather, marriage is not the government's business, marriage is not society's business, marriage is God's business, and then in the next breath deny or attempt to deny that marriage is a business. His proclamation that marriage is God's business immediately got me thinking to myself. A thinking out of which the following question or the following questions arose. Which God or whose God does the business of marriage belongs? Which God or whose God has the monopoly on and copyright on the business of marriage? I am still left to wonder. And who or what does the Reverend Doctor and Pastor conceive God to be? Does he mean that marriage is the business of his God, the Christian God alone? If yes, then what about the other people's God? Do they each have their own marriage business as well? For example, Is marriage the business of the Jewish God, the Muslim God, the Hindu God, the Buddhist God, the Rastafarian God, you name it? And if my interpretation and understanding of the meaning of the English word God is correct, and if marriage is his, her, or its business, in other words, if marriage is the business of any God, then why should or why would mortal men and mortal women want to get involved or want to interfere with that God's business if they are not insane? Frankly speaking, if marriage is God's business, or if marriage is the business of God or the business of a God, then I think humans should stay the hell out of it. Don't get involved in God's business. The Reverend said something that I personally found quite interesting as well, if not inaccurate, partially true, or misleading to say the least. He said that the government, in response to people's idea, has changed the marriage law. In fact, let me quote exactly what the Reverend said, and I quote, "The government has legally changed the marriage law, where marriage is now between two consenting adults regardless of sex." Unquote. Now, based on my quick search right here on the internet, he may be correct in his language and description of the enactment of the Civil Marriage Act, or a bill known as Bill C-38, in July of 2005. This is an act or a legislation that legalizes, or this is the act and legislation that legalizes same-sex marriages all across Canada. So he may be right in his description, in his language. However, without having read the act myself, and by just applying my basic common sense, where I think he may have seriously erred is in his follow-up statement or comment. And I'll quote. He said, "A man can marry anything that he wants. A woman can marry anything that she wants." Unquote. I honestly don't think that a man can marry anything that he wants, or a woman can marry anything that she wants in Canada as a result of this legislation, as a result of the enactment of the Civil Marriage Act. And in as much as some people may take offense to the law because of religious beliefs, philosophical beliefs, or ideologies, and otherwise biases, the fact is that in order for marriage to be considered legal in Canada, it has to be between two consenting adults that are humans. For inasmuch as Canada may be considered by many as being one of the most liberal societies in the world today, and inasmuch as Canadians do love their pets and many other things, to the best of my knowledge, they can't be legally married to any of them. I continue to listen to all other callers and many other callers, some of whom made some great points, great comments. And I continued to listen until way into the program, but I still did not get a clear definition, or at least a definition to my satisfaction, from anyone as to what marriage is, or even the definitions of the English word marriage and institution. And that, along with promptings from those that were in my company, were what led me to call into the program and ask 4 questions. And I quote my questions exactly as I asked them. I said, my question to the Reverend Doctor, my question was directed at him and not necessarily the host, but I would be happy with anyone who could have answered them. I said, my question to the Reverend Doctor and Pastor are 4, and they are as follows. Could you please define the English words marriage and institution for me? 2, if marriage is an institution, who would freely want to be in an institution and why? 3, who truly belongs in an institution, any institution? And 4, and is it possible that people that are already in institutions, any institution, and people who may end up in an institution, any institution, may not fare that well? However, that were my questions. However, to my disappointment and to that of my associates that were with me listening to the program, none of my 4 questions were answered. But from my perspective, they appeared to be the most unwelcome and were just casually, if not sarcastically or contemptuously, dismissed or ignored. Now, this is the end of part 1 of this presentation. Please join me in part 2 for the continuation as I delve deeper into the meanings and definitions of the words marriage and institution. See you then.